Happy New Year, everyone. The free state of Florida during lockdown. The Electoral College objections loom. Georgia Senate runoff tomorrow, and a New York bill to detain public health risks. Welcome, everybody. Great to be here. Look, I was in Florida, and it was amazing. It really was. It was like an advertisement for what can happen when your state is not run by people who are completely beholden to the Democrat Party. When your state is not overtaken by those who either seek to control you or are too terrified, too anxious to make reasonable decisions, to come to fair-minded conclusions about the kind of trade-offs involved in dealing with a pandemic like we're seeing right now. I was in Florida for a week, and what did I see? People going about their lives, going to businesses, going to restaurants. I went out to eat night after night. Restaurants open, businesses, stores. Imagine this. I realized that I needed something. I had to go buy something, and I didn't even have to call ahead and say, hey, are you? No. I went to a bookstore in Florida. It was almost like a time warp. And you might say, well, hold on a second, Buck. They must be engaged in an experiment in human sacrifice. There must be a tremendous amount of loss as a result of their reckless policies in the Sunshine State. And it turns out that's not true at all. In fact, Florida is, by the numbers, by fatalities, by hospitalizations, better off, has been throughout the course of the pandemic and continues to be better off than its two nearest states for comparison, New York and California. Florida's better off. Now, let's understand this. I've seen all these objections that will be raised. I've seen all the people that say, oh, no, look at the number of cases, and they pick some arbitrary. Look at the cases in Florida from December 18th to December 21st. See, it's not better off. It's pathetic. It's desperate. We can all tell what's going on here. Let's understand this. For lockdowns to be even remotely worth it, for lockdowns to be intelligent public policy, there should be no debate when you see the numbers between cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in states with the most stringent lockdowns versus those that have taken a more open approach. We should be having a conversation about how Florida has 2 or 3 times the COVID cases, 2 or 3 times the deaths, not that it actually has less than states that have been going through continuous lockdowns for months and months. It should be absolutely obvious. It should be clear. And yet, it isn't. You don't even have to get into a debate about whether Florida is better than New York when it comes to how it has handled COVID, whether Florida is better than California. And yes, we're talking about a large Republican-governed state versus 2 very large Democrat-governed states. This is about politics now because political parties have made it so. Because people that believe that Fauci is some kind of a saint have convinced themselves that anyone who doubts the wisdom of these catastrophic, irrational policies is a bad person, is a person who doesn't care about human death, doesn't care how many people lose their lives. Well, as it turns out, those people were wrong. They were wrong. And we can see it. And we all need to understand this. You need to be secure in the knowledge that you have from seeing what's going on around you in the country right now. You need to know that the experts are not going to come over to your side because this has become the experts and the elites unified against those who believe that freedom and the Constitution and the right to ask questions aren't supposed to be suspended the moment there's an emergency. In Florida, I was at restaurants. I was out. I was seeing people living their lives. I was down there with brothers, my two brothers and my girlfriend, and seeing various friends, some of whom you'd even know from this show and from conservative media, people who either have moved down there, and they were showing another way. You know, the states in our system are supposed to be experiments in a sense. There's the essence of the states as laboratories for different policies. And the Democrat obsession with the most stringent lockdowns possible, the Democrat obsession with making this as horrific and economic and emotional and psychological cost as possible from this pandemic. It's not going to stop. We have to stop them. We have to win the argument. They don't even see the results that we see and come to the same conclusion. They don't turn around and say, you know what, you're right. We shouldn't have done this. This was a bad idea. No, they turn around and they say, we need more of it. We need more. Double down, triple down. Why hasn't it worked? Because we haven't done it well enough. They always talked about the data in the early days of this. And Fauci and the others would talk about their adherence to the data. Well, when you point out that compliance when it comes to masking, compliance when it comes to these draconian policies is higher than it has ever been, and particularly in places like New York and California. And I'm just most familiar with the numbers in those states. There are others you could put in there as well. But they said that they figured it out. They knew what to do. They had the facts, you see. And so they told tens of millions of people, cancel Thanksgiving, cancel Christmas, don't see your loved ones, live in fear, watch your business be shut down, watch your bank account, watch your life savings evaporate. Because it's the only way you'll be safe. And now what you see is that we had to do all that. We had no choice. They made us. They used the force of the state, and we're not safe. The numbers are off the charts, cases rising as though the stuff we're doing doesn't really stop it at all. That's where we are. Observe it. See it for yourself. I came back from Florida. I was on the plane. I get to New York, and sure enough, there's members of the National Guard taking data because they insist that we fill out all this information about ourselves so that we can be tested and traced. What is that going to do? By the time they contact me, a week will have passed. I'll already be beyond the quarantine phase. They've got hundreds of thousands. Now, 1 million New Yorkers say that they've tested positive for COVID. 1 million. That's the latest number you see. And the claim is what? They're going to be able to call every contact, every person you see. This was idiotic from the start. You cannot test and trace 1 million people. Never mind the actual millions of people beyond that you have no idea whether they have this or not. New York COVID hospitalizations are up 80% in 4 weeks. 1 million residents have tested positive. And what is Governor Cuomo doing? He's saying that they'll fine people $1 million now. Any practitioner who gives a COVID vaccine to somebody who's not considered at the high priority will be fined $1 million. Oh, that's right. Make it so that now there are enormous penalties attached to giving someone a vaccine that could save their life if it's not in the order that a bunch of feckless bureaucrats decide. That's going to make the vaccine get distributed faster? That's going to help? No, they haven't helped at all. They've been catastrophic failures. In fact, chief among them has been the governor of New York, although the governor of California is right behind him. And now we have this incoming Biden administration that has learned none of the actual lessons based on the data, and they're going to do exactly what has been done all along and that has failed all along. And if we don't stop them, if we don't win the argument and push back and non-comply, everyone will eventually see this as one of the greatest periods of national folly of the last 100 years. I mean, this is insane what we're doing. You can see it for yourself. I saw it. People are going about their lives in Florida. Yes, there are cases there. Yes, it's a very serious disease. It's very dangerous to the elderly. And yet you can still allow life to continue while trying to take reasonable steps to protect yourself, reasonable precaution. What you see in these Democrat enclaves and what you will see from the federal level from Biden Harris is unreasonable. You'll see unreasonable steps, not just continued, enhanced, expanded. They'll go even further into this, which is just the height of stupidity. We can have our freedom back, or at least much more of it than we've had. We can have our constitutional rights back. Freedom is our fight this year. 2021, I'm telling you right now, is going to be all about the fight for liberty on an individual basis and for a free society. You have the lockdowns, you have the tech censors, you have a Democrat Party that increasingly just bears its authoritarian fangs without any sense whatsoever of fair play and good faith toward the other side, because they haven't had it for years, because defeating Trump in their minds justified absolutely anything. This year is going to be about the fight for freedom. Make no mistake about it. I don't care who the president ends up being. I don't care who ends up winning the next 2 seats in this Georgia runoff. It's going to be about taking back our freedom from those who have taken it away from us and who are ultimately, I think, terrified about what would happen if the American people came to the realization that this was all for what exactly? The mask mania, the lockdowns, the constant lectures, the Orwellian propaganda everywhere about hand washing and social distancing. What exactly did that save us from? Where are the results? Where's the upside of any of that? As a policy, if you say that, they'll just yell at you that you don't believe in science. And then they'll tell you that there are more than 2 genders. That's the world we live in now in this country. "24 hours away, give or take, from, I guess what would call it, G-Day for Georgia? Not quite D-Day, but it's a big day tomorrow. We have 2 Senate seats hanging in the ballot. And with those 2 seats, control of the Senate. And if the Democrats were to manage to take this, and if the current path, which will have a Biden-Harris presidency, continues, which I think we all have to assume it will, that doesn't mean we give up the fight, but it means that we have to prepare for this reality. And that's what I've been telling you for weeks. And I think now, if we all look back at that, in fairness, that was the correct approach. Fight, but prepare. All right. This means you keep throwing the ball, you keep running up the middle. It doesn't matter if you're down 2 touchdowns, but you also got to be ready for the possibility that you're not going to the Super Bowl. But in Georgia, what we see are 2 Democrat candidates who are really particularly well suited to show you what the Democrat Party has become in this moment, and notably this Ossoff character, who is, it's almost like a elitist Democrat created in a lab. I mean, this guy, nothing about him speaks to strength or wisdom or good judgment. He's just a little rich boy who wants to be important and powerful. And so he figures if he mouths the right slogans, if he says the right things, Ossoff will get to be a senator. And look, there are plenty of clownish politicians on both sides, and there are people who, they've got a lot of access to money, maybe from their family, whatever it may be, and they're not particularly impressive either. But this Ossoff guy, I got to say, not somebody that you'd want in your foxhole. That is for sure. Kelly Loeffler. I was surprised at this one. Kelly Loeffler able to throw some elbows when necessary. Here she is, play 1.
Georgia knows that Jon Ossoff is a pathological liar. He's a trust fund socialist whose only job has been working for the Chinese Communist Party in recent years. And look, here's the deal. If we're going to tell lies about my campaign, let's tell the truth about who he's campaigning with. This is the truth. Radical liberal Raphael Warnock has been involved in child abuse, domestic abuse. He's someone who has praised Fidel Castro, Louis Farrakhan, Karl Marx, James Cone. These are radicals. He has attacked our military, our police, our small businesses, and every Georgian who wants to live the American dream. So I'm not going to be lectured by some 33-year-old trust fund socialist who's a pathological liar.
Let it rip, Kelly. Let it rip. I like it. I like how she gets right to it and decides that she's not going to hold back on this guy, who really does remind me very much of that Obama-era meme of Pajama Boy, the guy picking his, if you remember, he was picking his Obamacare plan in his pajamas, drinking tea. He kind of even looks a little bit like Ossoff. But not that that matters. Kind of funny, though. So Georgia matters a whole lot. Because if we lose Georgia, well, then we all recognize that if we lose Georgia, if we lose both of these Senate seats, the Democrats are almost certain to have unified control. And really, let's be honest, folks, it's 99% that that's what's going to happen if they take those Senate seats. They will have unified control of the government. Nancy Pelosi was just voted in as Speaker of the House. You know what my favorite thing about that is? Talking about a Chardonnay socialist. I mean, Nancy is, should we call her Pinot Nancy or Chardonnay Nancy? She's among the most outrageous hypocrites and frauds you could find in the Democrat Party, which is saying a lot. I mean, that's quite impressive to pull off that feat. But Chardonnay Nancy is now the Speaker of the House, and the next as the next Congress now is going about their business. And she also required the votes of some members of Congress who had recently tested positive for COVID, but were told to fly in and vote anyway. I saw this. It's amazing, isn't it? You can't say it's unbelievable because, of course, you believe it. Because, of course, COVID is so dangerous and so horrible that you can't be in the same home over the holidays as loved ones, including loved ones who just by nature of father time don't have much time left. You can't see them. But if a Democrat who's important is going to have a funeral, well, then the COVID rules get waived. If a Democrat needs votes on the floor of the Congress, then the COVID rules get waived, almost like the virus has a political affiliation. You know, the virus will back off. And you saw this even over the last summer when suddenly mass gatherings were safe during COVID outbreaks because it was necessary for public health for BLM to burn down stores, loot buildings, and attack strangers for no reason. Yeah. Those are the kind of public health experts that we've been listening to. Don't get me started on Dr. Fauci. That guy is one of the biggest catastrophes to befall America. Fauci belongs in the history books alongside generals in World War I who sent thousands and thousands of men directly into the machine guns, hoping the other side would run out of ammo.
But while we are on the subject of socialism for the rich, which my Republican friends have suddenly become very concerned about, let me talk about the Trump tax proposal that was pushed very hard by Senator McConnell and the Republican leadership, and where I think every Republican voted for it. You want to talk about socialism for the rich? It is not the bill that puts $2,000 into working class hands all over this country. That ain't socialism for the rich. This is socialism for the rich in that bill. Amazon, oh, by the way, I must say this if I may, we were quoting the liberal Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest guy in the world. So here is Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, and they received a tax rebate. They paid nothing in 2018 in federal taxes. That's a corrupt tax system to begin with. But then on top of that, they received $129 million as a tax rebate. That, Senator Thune, is what socialism for the rich.
If there's one thing that Bernie Sanders knows, it's socialism. That's for sure. He's not necessarily honest about socialism, but he certainly is quite familiar with it. It's his ideology. I mean, it's this guy's reason for being. It's why he is a senator. It's why he was almost the Democrat candidate for the presidency. And I wish he had been. Because at least with Sanders, you get some honesty about what the Democrat Party is. At least with Sanders, they're more upfront about it. Notice how he goes after corporations. And this is just all for show. It's almost like a Bernie Sanders candidacy. It's to make it seem like there's an openness about the radical aims of the Democrat Party to get the base all on board, but they're not going to let them really run the show because they don't understand the bargain. The radicals, the squad, the people in the Democrat Party on the far left, they're there to make noises about these things, but they're not the ones that are really going to run things. AOC just voted for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House. That happened. I think the whole squad actually voted for Nancy Pelosi. Now, what do we learn from all of this? The radical left, the activist class with the Democrat Party, they're there to pretend that all they care about is social justice, advancing minorities' interests, and advancing socialism for the poor, for the working class and for the poor, but really for the poor, actually, for the non-working class, and for the elites on the other side. You have Democrats like Pelosi, who this is the whole game. Who benefits from the Democrat Party the most? It's the people that are the most dependent on government and the people who benefit the most from government. And that does include very powerful corporate interests. That does include libs who run the tech monopolies. It includes the leftists who are in charge of places like Amazon and Google and others. Yeah, that's right. They like the government because it can be an anti-competitive edge for them. It can prevent them from having to really deal in a free and fair marketplace with opposition. Right? The more regulations you have, the more carve-outs in the tax code, the more legal hurdles and all the different individuals' back office that you have to comply with the different dictates from D.C. Well, if you're already a mega corporation, you're making a ton of money, you're good to go. Big business loves big government. Don't ever forget that. Especially big business that can continue to find ways to benefit from things like the tax code. So Bernie Sanders railing on about $2,000 to Americans. This is where Trump and Bernie agree. And there is something, because of the populist nature of some of Trump's ideas and some of Bernie Sanders' ideas, there is something to the crossover. And there has been on trade, there has been on America First and the workers in this country getting the benefits of being Americans over foreigners and having jobs outsourced and all the rest of it. Now that work is far from done, and as we know, there are a lot of continued battles we have to deal with from the Trump first term. But I'm just telling you right now, I don't know why Republicans. It's almost like they're trying to lose these two Georgia Senate seats. It's almost like they don't want to be back in the mix. I don't know what to say. Now, there are two elements here. There are the Linwood, I'm crazy, going to say insane things about the election, which is so damaging because it undermines the very real questions and concerns about the election, about the integrity of the election, the fraud, all of that. Right? What's a great way to undermine real objections? It starts to feel like this guy, Linwood, is either crazy or he's a Trojan horse for the left, because the best way to undermine the real objections is to constantly spout nonsense. And if you look at this guy's Twitter feed, I'm not even going to get into it, but the guy's it's just gibberish. It's just crazy stuff that he's saying now. And there was a time when I know many Trump supporters were looking to him because he was saying, oh, no, it's all a fraud and we're going to prove it. And I was saying, okay, great. Show me that proof. I think it was a fraud too. Where's the proof? And other people are looking at this and talking about double voting, and they're talking about dead people voting. And those are the real considerations and concerns What do you have when you look at the Lynn Woods of the world? What are they telling you? What are they saying? I can't even. It's too silly to even repeat. I mean, he's talking about people being tried for treason and just crazy stuff. So remember that there are those who pretend to be in this fight, and they're actually helping the other side. There are those who are holding themselves up as the great champions of MAGA, and they are actively assisting. They are aiding and abetting the Pelosiite left, the Democrats, the socialists. And they're doing so either because they're too stupid to know otherwise, or more likely, they're frauds. They're frauds. And they understand exactly what they're doing, actually. They understand exactly what's going on here. Now, there was this phone call over the weekend that was released by this Georgia Secretary of State, Raffensperger. And this guy, again, he's a little rich boy, okay? And, that's just the truth. So Raffensperger is a rich guy who wanted to be important in Georgia, so he becomes Secretary of State. Really has no experience or knowledge but okay, look, he's got the role, so we got to deal with this. And Trump called him. And I'm just going to say this. There are certain things an honorable person doesn't do unless there are extenuating, extreme circumstances to it, and then you'd have to explain what those are. But you don't have a phone call with the President of the United States that you surreptitiously tape and then publicly release. If anyone that I know, if anyone who worked for me or with me or around me did this, I would be rightly outraged just because it's a dishonorable loser thing to do. And that is what Raffensperger did. And you have to wonder, what does he think? What purpose does this serve? I think it's because his own ego. He was worried that Trump was going to say things that he didn't like. So if he taped it, he'd have that as backup. But even still, if you're going to do that, tell the president that says, Mr. President, I'd like to record this call. That's the honorable thing to do. That would be the way to. Now, I think Georgia has a one-party consent, but I do believe it was across state lines. Anyway, I don't know. The recording laws are a bit complicated. They're definitely variable, and they're a little bit complicated. Here is some of this phone call, though. Play clip 21.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. So tell me, Brad, what are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this.
Now, what's the media saying about this? How are they taking this? Well, they're claiming that Trump is trying to cheat. He's trying to push and steal an election. That Trump is trying to. That's what they're doing. Now, what is Trump really saying here? His belief, and I would bet any amount of money that you want that Trump does think this, does believe this. Although I don't like to bet, so I'll take that away. But you know what I'm saying. I bet you, I'll just say it that way. I bet you that Trump really does believe that he won this election, that he won the election. And he thinks he won in Georgia. So all he's saying in Trump's mind is, come on, man, you've got to get me the real answers here. There's no way that the rate of absentee ballot rejection or mail-in ballot rejection was so much lower this time around with so many more ballots. It's not possible. So find out what happened here. And all you have to do is show me 12,000 roughly. I know he said 11,000 something, 12,000 ballots that are invalidated from their side because they were illegal ballots, and I win. That's what Trump is saying. But I know that the way that this is reported on is Trump is pressuring him. If he's really going to pressure him, he would make some kind of a threat, you would assume, right? He would do something beyond this. But now they're at DEFCON 1 against Trump. Now it's the usual panic. And here's Senator Van Hollen. Oh, it's a criminal act. Play 7.
Well, I do think this has the elements of a criminal act, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. I think the authorities in Georgia and a future Justice Department need to look into that and make a determination about whether or not to bring charges. Obviously, this president is facing a lot of other potential civil and criminal liability when he leaves office for other acts he's committed, and this is, going to be part of that review by future administration. But I think, or the authorities in Georgia.
Now, there's no criminal act here. This is just bull crap from a clown. But what he's telling you is important to remember, and I want all of you to remember this. They will not be satisfied when Trump leaves office. They will not be satisfied with that. It's not going to happen. They want him to be prosecuted. That is what the Democrats actually want to happen. They want to see him dragged into court, criminally prosecuted, and ruined, because in the back of their minds, a lot of them must know. I mean, this has already come out. They recognize that what's gone on here looks shady to tens of millions of Americans. And beyond that, the Trump movement is going to continue. The Trump movement doesn't stop just because Trump isn't the president. And what really we need to start thinking about, what are we going to call it? What is this conservative populism? Is it constitutional populism? We need to come up with a word. Is it just, MAGA? Or what are we going to say about this? Because it's not stopping. It's more than even just a set of policies. It's an approach to politics. That's not going away. So they want Trump to be prosecuted because they feel like that's the only way that they'll get to a point where all of a sudden, it will all stop. It will be over. It'll be done. The nightmare of having to deal with this guy come to a conclusion. I'm just going to tell you this right now. This is the Rubicon, my friend. If Democrats bring a criminal charge against Donald Trump, and if you don't think they're capable of it, I got news for you. I think they are. At the state level, they'll bring some kind of rinky-dink, Mickey Mouse criminal charge against President Trump when he leaves office. We need to be prepared for that. Because notice how quickly it shifted from unity, which just meant shut up and do what you're told, to, well, now we're going to have to actually go after Trump criminally and go after his family members. They didn't miss a beat. No issue with it. No problem with it whatsoever. And they're serious about it. While our side has got Paul Ryan and other people going around telling all of us, the gentlemanly way to act, the Democrat side is saying that Trump needs to be criminally prosecuted. The Democrat side is saying that Trump is a huge target for retribution. And that's what they're looking to do. It's just a question when they get the opening.
If I were the House Democrats, there's nothing stopping you right now from convening the Oversight and Judiciary Committee, play the audio in full for an hour straight, make every member sit there and listen to it, and then vote on impeachment right there, because there has to be a cost for these things. And even if he won't be removed and indicted by the Senate, President Trump deserves the historical stain, the permanent stain of impeachment. There's a reason why these processes exist in the first place. It's to have some measure of accountability, even if not in real time, but for the future and for that context. It has to be made very clear by a co-equal branch of government that what Donald Trump is caught on tape doing is illegal. It's wrong. It's undemocratic.
They want to impeach him again. Just in case you're wondering, is Buck going too far with this? Do they really want to prosecute? Well, they want to impeach him again. We've got, 3 weeks? Less than 3 weeks before there's a transition. And I know, look, I understand there's going to be an objection to the certification of the results. There should be more investigation. I agree with that. I agree that we should have more information. We should look into this. We should look for accountability. I agree with all of that. But I'm telling you the truth. A lot of other people are going to pander. I don't pander. The objections that these 11 senators are considering are not going to stop anything. They're not unconstitutional. It's not a crisis. It's fine. It's the right thing to do, but it's not going to stop anything. But they still, even with all of this, Democrats are out there talking about how they want to impeach this guy. You know, well, how many people were talking about impeaching and prosecuting Obama? And when I say people, I'm not talking about, your random buddy Phil who lives down the street from you and mutters to himself a lot. I'm talking about actual elected Democrats in office. How many of them were talking? I'm sorry, Republicans. How many elected Republicans were actually talking about doing this? None. We're all happy that Trump had won in 2016, and we're thinking about the future. Well, not every Republican was happy, but a lot of us were. Now here we are. Now what we see continues to play out in exactly the way that we should have expected all along, which is that their hope is that they can get retribution against Donald Trump. Not enough to beat him. They want to get him. And not just him. People who supported him, people around him, maybe people who even say too many nice things about him on radio. Just telling you right now, wait for it. I'll tell you when it happens. IRS all of a sudden is going to come knocking on the Buckster's door. Hey, Buck, nice radio show you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it, Trump supporter.